Hello, my fellow comic book collectors. I've been doing this series for a little while now where I ask the question, would you rather? And usually I show two things and I say, oh, these two things cost the same amount of money and which would you rather have? But today I'm going to do a little different, and it was because of my friend Steve Gentner. And I was talking to him. Actually, he was sort of ranting. Actually, it's really funny. He was sort of ranting because he kind of learned the bad news that the book that he sent off to CGC ended up getting a restored, it was flagged as being restored. And they basically asked him whether or not he still wanted to go through the grading with it, because it is going to be restored. And there's nothing that they could do to remove that restoration. So, of course, he's going to go ahead with it. But he's, obviously disappointed by the fact that his book is restored. And he's more of a comic purist that if it's not a blue label, it's not, it's not a good book. But I think he might be coming around on that. And so he was sort of ranting about that. And one of the things that he was saying, and this is something that I've said as well, is if you look at pretty much any other industry, any other collectible industry, okay, and you look at things like cars, a car, if they don't renovate that car, or if they don't replace the parts, or make it kind of functional, it will break down. So these classic cars that you see that are in like pristine condition, well, they've been had parts replaced, they've had things done to them to keep them in top working condition. Often they'll use parts from the era, but the point is they do replace parts. They do try to keep it 100% clean, like 100% minty fresh car. And if you look at historical paintings, it's the same thing. Like, paintings over time they get impacted by the environment. If you have like a 400-year-old painting, well, the chances are time will show on that painting. Like, you can even, like, I used to work in the art industry, and what would happen is even just like the painting not being exposed to sun or anything, just being open to air, would get dust that would kind of get embedded into the paint over time. And, they would need to be cleaned. So that's part of the thing. And you don't devalue the painting because it has some kind of restoration to it. It actually increases the value because it presents that much better. And you value the work of the restorer that has brought that painting back to life. So the question becomes, why is it that in comics that you get the opposite effect? That when you have restoration, that actually kills the value. And we have this term, purple label of death, which is the purple label that CGC will give you if you, for example, here's a purple label, right? A blue label means that it has no restoration. Purple label means that it has been restored. And this book has been restored. So you got that purple label. And often the case is that, with restored books, you have that situation where, once it gets that purple label, the value really can drop. And I'm going to tell you a couple stories. I want to tell you a couple stories. And this is where the would you rather part of this whole video. You're probably wondering, why does this have anything to do with would you rather? Well, I'm going to get into that. And the first story that I have to tell you about is the situation where there are some really big books that I want, that I truly, truly want in my collection. But I cannot afford. I really cannot afford. And one of them is Wonder Woman #1, a book that I truly wanted because it is kind of a grail book. And one of the things that I wanted was not just like a 0.5 grade, because that's the entry level. You can get a 0.5 grade and it'll still be really expensive, like maybe $15,000 for a 0.5 Wonder Woman 1. It's a lot of money for a book that's not even complete. It's going to look pretty bad. And so you wonder, like, wow, that's a lot of money for a book that looks terrible. But that's maybe all that you can afford. So what would you rather? A 0.5 or a 7.5? And this is my 7.5. I can show you it. It's quite beautiful. Colors are just so sharp. Edges are crisp. That's actually the problem with this book, actually. Funny thing. It's been trimmed. Like, you know, a slight amount of trimming. But it's been trimmed on all three sides. That's why it looks so sharp. That's why it looks so pretty. And because it has been trimmed and has been restored, and it can't be unrestored. This is a one-way trip for this book. It is a restored label, high grade, and typically, if it was this high grade, it would be maybe $140,000, $150,000. But because it was restored, I was able to pick it up for this almost the same price as a 0.5. Does that make any sense to you? Like, this book, you know, is beautiful. And so that's the question to you. Which would you rather? 7.5 or 0.5? And so that's my first story. And this was really my way of getting the book. That, you know, not only did I get the book that I wanted, and I didn't think that I could get it, because, like, really, you know, I would either get this kind of beaten up thing or you know, I'd get something that wouldn't present very well. Or I could get a restored book that is just presents like so, it's like so, it is beautiful. You gotta say, you know, it's like looks brand new. So, you know, the point is, like, I could get something that really showcases the book, or I could get something that looks terrible and pay about the same amount of money. So which would you rather? And in some cases, with restored, it might be the only option that you have. What people don't realize is a lot of these Golden Age books are ones where restoration was done a lot of the time. That's why, as I was saying, my friend, he basically sent off a bunch of books to CGC, and he sent 7 off, and 3 of them were restored. He didn't know that they were restored. But that happens, and it happened a lot with sort of these premier books, that people would restore them just to maintain the books. Like, if you're dealing with a document, like you got to see comics as like sort of like a document that is 80 years old. Well, documents will over time break down. That's why you get off-white pages or cream pages, because what happens is the natural elements will break down the paper, and the books will gradually disintegrate. Like, all these comics that we have, you know, give it a few hundred years, and they will be dust, unless we maintain them, restore them, and keep them in premium condition. And that's really where restoration kind of does play a role, that we're going to have to bite the bullet at some point and say, hey, we got to get these books restored, or they're going to go to dust. You know, the slabs will help them. That does protect them, and they actually put some special paper in to kind of protect them as well. But the point is, over time, these books will disintegrate unless we do something to maintain them. So just something to consider. I'm trying to give you the case about, would you rather a restored book or an unrestored book? And a restored book in high grade or low grade unrestored. The other case that I'd like to make, or other story that I'd like to tell you, is a book that there's a couple books that are in the mail, and one that's in the mail, and one that is a book that I finally got, and I'm kind of excited about it. And I will tell the story at a later date, but I'm going to tell just the entry of the story. It'll make sense. So the first one is Police Comics #1. It was on my want list last year, and when I put it on my want list, actually, the reason I put it on my want list is I actually thought I could get it before I actually, when it was on my want list, I thought, there was an opportunity to get it, actually. So I thought, I'll have it on my want list, and I'll actually be able to cross it off my want list at the same time. So the funny thing was, the auction was right after I released that video, and I thought, okay, I'm going to win this. Because I looked at the prices that book, Police Comics #1, had sold for, and it was a 2.0. And I looked at the prices, and I knew that in the past it sold for about $3,000. So I figured, hey, I'll go in with $6,000. That's my budget. I think I'll win it with that kind of budget because I'm going twice what it had sold for previously. So I was like, I'm going to win this book. I wanted that book. It's the first Plastic Man. It's the first Phantom Lady. It is a cool book. So I wanted to win it. So I was winning. Actually, I had the top bid was like $3,000. And then the day of the auction comes up, and things always change on the day of the auction. And the bid went up to $6,000 really, really quickly. It was like, okay, I'm still winning, still have a hope. And then it kept on going, and it kept on going, and it kept on going, and it went up over $10,000. I think it finished off at $11,400 or something like that, in that range. And I was like, man, what? It's like way above it's like 4 times what the previous sale was. And the previous sale was a few years before, not that many years earlier. So I didn't think it was going to go that crazy. So because of that sale, though, there was another sale, so that was a 2.0, and there was another sale for I think it was like a 4.0 or something like that, and it sold for like $18,000. So all of a sudden, this book that I thought I could get was going out of my price range. It was like, I'm not going to be able to get this book anymore. So, even if at a 0.5, if a 2.0 sells for around that $11,000 range, you'd expect a 0.5 to sell for around $6,000-7,000. To be fair, there are usually a lot of price compression on the lower grades. So, that's a pretty expensive book at that low grade. I was like, man, that's really annoying. So there was an auction though later. Actually, before the auction, there was a guy on eBay that had, I think it was a 2.5 or 3.0, and he had it for $17,000. So I was like, oh, that's pretty good. Maybe I can kind of talk him down on the price. And I sort of was talking to him. He wasn't really willing to budge on the price too much. I was trying to get him down to $13,000. Because I thought maybe, I could kind of swing that if I do installments or something. I was trying to negotiate with the guy. So what happened was, he was sort of kind of said, maybe later I'll consider your offer. So that book was sort of hovering there. I was thinking about it. It was still available. However, in the meantime, there was an auction on Comic Connect. And they had a restored copy of Police Comics #1 in a 7.0. Nice presenting 7.0. And I said, okay, I'm going to do what I did the first time. I'm going to have my mind was like, okay, I'm not going to spend more than $6,000. That was my budget. Originally, that was my budget. And the price, it was kind of like one of those battles, like where like somebody else was bidding on it and I was bidding on it, and like the timer would reset and you'd go and then it would go up by a couple $100, go up by a couple hundred more, and it was like a big battle. So eventually, though, I won that battle, and I won it for like 5,500 range. I think that was what it was, and I was like, oh, this book that I just won, which is a 7.0, beautiful presenting copy, has a slight color touch on it. I just got cheaper than a 0.5. How does that make any sense at all? If I even remove the color touch, and let's say it mangled the book, like you remove color touch, sometimes it kind of puts holes into the book. Even with that, even like the worst case scenario, maybe it gets like a 2.0. Like that'd be the worst case scenario. Well, still, that's triple what I paid for it. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make any sense at all. So so the question becomes again, would you rather a 7.0 restored or the same price of 0.5? So something to consider. To kind of hammer this point in, there's a book that I've been hinting at for a while now. It was on my want list a few times, that I finally did get. And the copy that I'm getting is an 8.5. Beautiful. Looks like awesome. Like it's one of the best copies I've ever seen of this book. It is restored though. It definitely is restored. So, it's one of those books where I don't even think you can reverse the restoration. So, it is restored. It is what it is. It had a sale in the same grade, but blue label, for like actually one higher grade. I think it was one higher grade for $500,000. $500,000. So no way. There's no way that I could afford that. And if I did buy that, I'd probably have no wife. She'd probably leave me. She'd be like, "What are you doing?" So yeah, it's one of those incredible books. And I got it in 8.5, restored, obviously. But how much did I pay for it? Well, I know that there was somebody trying to sell a 1.0, okay, copy, and they're selling it. I think it was 15,000. So, that's that shows you how expensive this book is. And I paid 14,000 for my copy of the 8.5. So does that make any sense? So would you rather an 8.5 restored or a 1.0 blue label? Blue label one will look terrible. It will, generally be pretty rough looking. The 8.5 is beautiful. It presents extremely well. So that's what this would you rather is all about. Buying restored books. Would you, and that really becomes the question going forward that we have to think about. Are we overly correcting for the fact that it's a purple label? Are we, like the fact that you can buy a high grade restored book, and sometimes I can see I can see people saying, okay, well, this is gonna be a bit of an aside, but I can see people saying, well, some of those high grade ones, they're just, it's almost like a completely new book. Like they've been restored so much, like color touch completely and trimming and cleaning and all this kind of stuff done to it. And I can say, okay, yeah, in some cases I can understand where some of that might detract from the value of the book. But at the same time, think about the cars, the collector cars. Same idea at the end of the day. So the question becomes, what would you rather? A high grade restored book or something that looks terrible, maybe even costs more, and might be just falling apart. So that's my would you rather. I'd love to hear people's feedback about this one. What do you think about restored books? Do you think it really is that restored books are worth less, or should be worth that much less than the blue label version of the same book? I'd love to hear people's opinions on that. And thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Bye for now.